So what I'm doing is meeting people like you and trying to explain what the interests of employers are, and that's obviously what I'll be aiming at again today. So first of all, thank you for the invitation to take part in this meeting about something which is really truly important to everybody in Europe and the European Union, because the level of youth unemployment really is unacceptable. The European economic system, the European labor market, and European politicians will have to deal with this issue if we want to have the support of our populations and the citizens of Europe to the European model. And it's very timely done by the European Commission to start up projects like Youth on the Move, Skills for Jobs, and other similar initiatives. And I must say, as a representative of business, I'm deeply concerned about the ability of our labor markets to utilize the resources which millions of young people in Europe have to offer. Given the challenges that we face when we look at the future European demographics, and given the future need for globally competitiveness and competitive competences, Europe really has to manage how we put the potential of all our young people to use. I say this, of course, not least as a representative of employers. As employers, we know that we'll face a severe shortage of skilled employees if we do not manage to give the young Europeans attractive capabilities, and if we do not manage to secure their transition to the labor market from VET schools, from colleges, and from universities. One only has to look briefly, which I hope we do now, yes? One only has to look briefly at how the unemployment figures are to realize how bad things really are. Young people all over Europe face higher unemployment rates than other citizens past their 20s. To make matters worse, the rates of unemployment are really frightening. From well over 5% at the top of the league, or bottom of the league, however you put it, those who are doing best, at least in the Netherlands, they have an unemployment rate among young people just over 5%, but we have a really unbelievable record level of more than 30% in Spain. We are indeed wasting huge amounts of human resources, and collectively we run the risk that millions of young Europeans will embark on a bleak future which can lead to all sorts of social ills. The political initiatives which can improve the prospects for young people are primarily within the realm of national politics. But progress is vital to Europe as a whole, and we therefore must draw on each other's experiences. In my view, there are certain fundamental aspects which all have to be involved in any strategy to combat youth unemployment in any single country and in the Union as a whole. And let me comment on these four aspects which I put on the slide as well. Young Europeans must live up to the demands from an increasingly competitive global economy. Their skills must match those of young Koreans, young Chinese, and Indians. Too many youngsters in Europe leave school without sufficient capabilities in math, science, and reading, writing. Just check out the PISA results. They're frightening in many ways. With insufficient basic competences, one cannot complete any upper secondary education which is relevant for employers and thus the labor market. Therefore, schools all over Europe must do better, particularly when we talk about the last 10 to 20% of whom an increasing number are boys, and particularly boys among immigrants. Secondly, to an employer, it's really self-evident that all, including young people, react to economic incentives. We must therefore design social and labor market policies so that any young person is rewarded for completing an exam and for using his or her abilities in any job which is available. In my own country, Denmark, we experienced a huge drop in youth unemployment when benefits schemes were changed so that unemployment was never an economically attractive option. My third point is that we must realize that labor market regulation all too often discriminate against young entrants to the labor market. The huge difference in unemployment rates between the young and the older in Europe can in many aspects be explained by legislation and other regulation which favor veterans in the labor market rather than young people. Restrictions on hiring and firing notoriously make employers reluctant to take on new employees. This, of course, hurts young entrants to the labor market, because it makes it even more, and additionally it makes it more risky for an employer to hire an inexperienced youth in case this young person cannot live up to expectations. In some of our labor markets, we favor the older participants in the labor market by inflexible arrangements such as last in, first out practices, which also works against young people. When we make labor markets inflexible, we limit the dynamics of the labor market. We reduce the number of job openings, and in this way we risk excluding the young from gaining a foothold on the labor market. My fourth point, which I'll point to, is to make all education relevant to the labor market, not just for the benefit of companies, but for the benefit of millions of young people. Many studies show that the likelihood that a graduate will get a job will increase significantly if work experience is an integral part of the curriculum. This is the case for vocational training and vocational education, but it's also the case for academics. The OECD have studied this aspect of education a great deal, for instance, in their recent report, Jobs for Youth. But much other evidence points strongly in this direction, particularly when it comes to vocational education and training. In many of our countries, the job prospects of unskilled, semi-skilled or skilled workers are under threat from international competition and technological change. We must improve the job prospects for any young person in this category of the labor market as much as possible. And the combination of workplace training and practice and more theoretical skills gained in schools seem to be the winning combination. This is also one of the conclusions of the OECD study I mentioned. The conclusion here is that the strengthening of apprenticeships and other dual vocational training programs can be attributed to the relative success in the labor market for youngsters in countries like Germany, Switzerland, Austria, and Denmark. We have some very favorable experiences in my own country, where we have the dual system of schooling and workplace training in our vocational education and training. And this is indeed very important for us in my country, because half the employees in our private companies actually have completed a dual vocational education. And all our forecasts point in the direction that we'll face a shortage in the supply of labor with vocational skills. So it's vital to our national economy at home and the companies which I represent that we're able to produce high numbers of vocational graduates who can immediately find a relevant job and who immediately can fit into the labor market and companies. It's our experience that one of the explanations for the low rate of unemployment in Denmark is to be found in the way the VT system is constructed. Nearly all VT graduates are employment after a year. This also applies to young male immigrants. If they succeed at vocational dual training, they'll find a job. 2/3 of the training in these educations take part in the company. And the experience is that once you graduate with vocational education and training, you get a proper job from day one, because you have the work experience which employers cherish so much. So my conclusion then is that the 4 factors that I mentioned are very relevant in the fight for lower youth unemployment. I've probably revealed no secrets when it comes to basic skills in math and reading, when I stress the relevance of economic incentives, or when I point to the advantages of a labor market where regulation and legislation help us to embrace rather than to exclude the young. But it's my view that the merits of the dual vocational education system for too long has been overlooked by policymakers in Europe. The European Union has been aware of the value of vocational education and training for many years. We've seen the establishment of the CDFOP Research Institute on VET, and there's a long effort which has been going on through the Copenhagen process. But it is my view that we have to think more carefully on how vocational education and training can contribute to better equipping young people for the labor market, to make VET graduates more attractive to companies that operate in fierce global competition. Dual vocational education and training, which is designed with a large share of workplace training and workplace knowledge, can supply the European labor market with young people, young men and women who can enter the labor market swiftly and who can contribute to European growth and wealth. It's my view that we cannot deal with youth unemployment in a satisfactory manner if we do not reap the benefits we can sow through a comprehensive European effort towards better dual vocational education and training. Thanks.